Good afternoon. I'm your host, Cindy Welch from the Southwest Florida Library Network. Over there in the top right is our American Sign Language interpreter, Deb McLean. And our presenter today is Linda Bruno. And we'd like to thank you for joining us for Be Your Best You, Intentional Blindness. Are you seeing only what you want to see? Linda has been developing and conducting training for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers training on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her training based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Linda is also certified with DDI and Achieve Global. Welcome, Linda. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and welcome everybody, as Cindy said, to our webinar today on intentional blindness. I must say that I think this is very appropriate along with the Shields Up that we'll be doing a couple of sessions on, but this particular webinar was designed before anybody had ever heard, or at least any of us had ever heard, of COVID-19. And yet when I think about the title and what I'm trying to get across today, it absolutely applies to what we're going through now, as well as a lot of other areas. So it's not just about COVID-19. It didn't even start out that way. There are a lot of other things to consider today, and I'm going to challenge you to think about where you might be showing intentional blindness. And one of the things that came to mind when I was developing this is I have a really good friend who's been friends with me for years and years and years, and he's gotten very tunnel vision, I guess you would call it. And we were talking a while back, and he was off on this rant again, and he was citing all of this information and quoting all of this stuff. And I said, I was very cautious because we've been friends for so long. But after he took a pause, I said, so do you think it could be, and that's the way I approached it with him. And he got real quiet, and I thought, oh no, I made him mad. We'll work through it. But he said, I think you might be right. And it was the first time anybody had ever challenged him. And I wasn't challenging him in a confrontational way. I was trying to get him to see that he had this tunnel vision, that he had become blind to everything else. And this is a human condition, by the way. We all tend to see things we want to see, focus on things that we're used to focusing on, even if we say in our minds or say to other people, I don't want to focus on this. I don't want to think about this. I don't want to only see this. But if we've already been focusing on that, our minds, which are incredible machines, decide for us that they're going to help us. There is this is something I just heard last week, so it isn't in your notes anywhere. Matter of fact, I had to look it up 3 or 4 different times to figure out what the 2 words were. I knew what the concept was, but I couldn't remember the words. It's called the reticular activating system, which is very, wow, big sounding. And it is. It's a big deal. It's just a bundle of nerves in our brainstem that filters out what comes into our mind. And what I mean by that is it thinks it's doing us a favor because let's say Linda Bruno has been spending all day looking at the news, looking at the statistics, looking at Facebook to see how everybody's afraid, just really bringing in that kind of information. That reticular activating system, and I'll just call it RAS if I mention it again, but that RAS system says, oh, this must be what Linda wants to know about. And anything else that comes at me gets filtered away. Not everything, but a lot, because the mind says, she's going to see tens of thousands of pieces of information over the course of the time she's awake today. I need to make sure she's getting what she needs. Now, obviously, I'm making a person out of our RAS system, but it's part of our person, isn't it? And as humans, we all have a tendency to do that. So that's what I'm talking about with intentional blindness. Sometimes we even know it, but we're so comfortable there that we intentionally stay there. And that's what I wanted to mention to you first off, so that we know that this is on us. because we have to make those choices, don't we? And any of you who have ever been in any of my webinars know that I challenge you to find out what you're going to change after you've invested an hour of your time today. Because I don't have that silver bullet to make everything okay. But I do have a lot of living under my belt and a lot of negativity and a lot of things that I have been guilty of as well with intentional blindness. And so I'm trying to glean from my own experiences to help you be aware of that as well. Yes, exactly, Albert. Reticular activating system. I just found that fascinating. I heard it on a podcast. I was on the treadmill exercising, and they were talking about the fact that everybody is focused on all of the negativity that's out there right now. And many of you know I try to be really positive. And even when I try to be positive, that can be a challenge, can't it? Because there's so much out there that isn't positive, that is very negative. Even in life, let's say COVID-19 never happened. You know what? Life still happens, doesn't it? And that's what I want you to think about. So the question becomes, first of all, type into the chat box what comes to mind for you when you saw the title Intentional Blindness and then the subtitle, of course, Are You Seeing Only What You Want to See? What came to mind for you? Oh gosh, I see a lot of things up there. Looking the other way, bias, choosing what I want to see, what I'm avoiding, politics, on purpose, all of the above, right? All of the above. Avoiding unhelpful information instead of addressing it, that's part of it too, Maria. Absolutely. That's intentional blindness, isn't it? We're going to avoid it because it's not helpful instead of just saying, you know what, I need to work through this. In denial, love these comments, ignoring things that are right in front of you, or almost gathering things to put right in front of us, right? Hearing what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear, putting your head in the sand, all of the above. A horse with blinders. Yeah, kind of like my friend with tunnel vision, right? So you get the picture there. There are so many descriptions. And I think that I'm just guessing here. I don't know, and I don't want to project my being onto you, but I think that because you answered so quickly, you get it. Now the choice becomes, are we going to take a deeper look and decide what we're going to do with it? There's a thing somebody said bias, I think earlier in one of the comments, and there's another thing called confirmation bias, which is very similar, and I think it probably originates. I've not had time to do the research on this because it was just a few days ago that I found this particular phrase, reticular activating system, but I think confirmation bias is probably rooted in that because that's the tendency to interpret any new evidence as confirmation of our own existing beliefs or theories. So isn't that what we do? We think the world is just a mess right now, and guess what? It is. However, there are a lot of things that are not a mess right now. And yet what we do is we interpret any new evidence to apply that to what we're already going through. It's the example they gave is if you learn a new word and you get really interested in that word, all of a sudden you see that word everywhere. There's an old theory that if you go buy a red car and you really love the color of that red car, you're going to see those red cars everywhere. So we need to be aware of what we're allowing into our sight line, don't we? And when I use sight line, I mean, what are we allowing to come to us and to come in front of us? And what are we actually going to choose then to take hold of and use to move through our days? There's a thing called the Johari window. When I first heard about it many, many years ago, it was when I first started doing training and I was doing some work with Whirlpool Corporation and somebody in their HR department, we were having a discussion before the training and she mentioned the Johari window. And I thought, I don't think I'm aware of that. So I went home and what do? I researched it, of course, and it's fascinating. And a picture of it is right here on the screen for you. But what fascinated me was the name of it. I thought, oh, wow, that's really fancy. No, it was theorized by Joe and Harry, and that's how they came up with the name of Johari. But the theory itself is very spot on in my estimation. They talk about four panes of a window, which is why it's called Johari window. There's the open and free area where you know about you and they know about you, and it's very obvious. You all probably, anybody that's been at my programs knows how passionate I am about my programs. So that's the open free area. There's the hidden area of what I know about me, but you don't. You have that hidden area as well. What things that you know about yourself that you don't share with other people. Maybe it's something that happened in your childhood, maybe it's a secret dream, whatever it might be, it's hidden from other people. The big area that really can sneak up on us is the blind area. And sometimes it's things that, for instance, I did with my friend that I knew about him, but he wasn't seeing because he had chosen to bring in all of this confirmation of what he already believed. And that's called a blind area. He opened that blind, if you will, and decided to take a closer look at that. But I'm going to suspect, we only discussed it for a few minutes, that that's not going to stick because he hasn't really given it that much thought. The fourth pane of that window is what they call the unknown area. I don't know about myself. You don't know. And I always joke that if nobody knows, is it really there? But I get what they mean. It's things like things that we have suppressed, something that might have happened in our childhood. People tell stories all the time about, well, my parents tell me this is what happened, but I don't remember it. So if the parents had never told them, that might have been an unknown area when they were with other people. So just wanted to make that obvious to you so that you think about your Johari window today as we go through the session. So you have handouts there, by the way, and I believe that Cindy sent you the handouts with your link to get into the meeting room today. I'm just going to suggest, thanks, Cindy. I'm just going to suggest that you might want to print those and use them. And the reason for that is not only will it help you absorb what we're talking about today, but it also might come in handy a month from now, 2 days from now, next year, or whenever, because an hour-long webinar doesn't get rid of intentional blindness, does it? It brings it to your attention, and it's going to give you some tips on what to do about it. But we may have to revisit this. I have to revisit these kinds of things. I'm a very positive, upbeat, looking for the good, trying to change my own life kind of person. But if I don't do these things on a regular basis, I can slide right into things like this as well. So thinking about this, when do you think intentional blindness might be a good thing? Protection, when you need to focus, too much news right now, let's just turn a blind eye to some of it because we can't control it anyway, right, Maria? That's the thing with this is we can't control it. An approaching deadline, yeah, you might want to be blind to everything else that's going to draw you away. Survival times, avoiding the potential downfall of a project in order to take a necessary risk. Oh, that's a good one, isn't it? Because some of us are not risk takers. I am in certain areas, but I'm not in other areas. And sometimes I just have to put myself out there. Trauma, absolutely, depending on what kind and how deep. And then we might want to get help for that because I believe in getting help when we have things like that going on. Maria P said, I don't think it's ever a good idea. Jack said, when we choose to ignore minor faults in others, that was the first thing I wrote down on my own notes, Jack. When I do these programs and I come up with these questions, I then go back and fill in my own answers. And I wrote down overlooking some flaws. And for me, that would be in me and in others. Because I know I have flaws, and sometimes whatever that flaw is a part of my behavioral tendency, and I will try to remain in my strengths, but I'm not going to beat myself up over certain things. I'm pretty driven, and I've had so many people over the last year or so try to convince me that the best thing in the whole world next to sliced bread would be if I would retire. Somebody even said to me yesterday, you having to come off the road might be a great transition for you to retire. I said, I don't want to retire. I'm driven. I love what I do. Don't do that to me. So I have to kind of become intentionally blind to people who are trying to do good for me. They're trying to make me see how wonderful life is. And this particular person sits inside all day long watching ESPN, and I'm not exaggerating, all day long. And that's just not Linda Bruno. That's great because she's dreamed of that, but it's not me. So that requires intentional blindness for me to not get offended by that and not to push back. when you're dealing with a negative person, being blind to the negativity so you don't go down the same path. It's so easy to do, though, isn't it, Lorelai? It's so easy not only to go down the same path, but to pile on, right? To add more to that. So all of those things that you're mentioning, and my scroll bar is not scrolling automatically. So if I miss somebody, we've got almost 60 people in the room. I do apologize for that. If it's a bad experience, sometimes it's better to forget about it. If it's not a good idea, forget about it. Looking past something annoying in order to focus on the positive. All the things you're saying, there is a time, isn't there? Don't overreact to rumors. Choose to be blind when you're trying to work through a project or something. Absolutely. The second thing I put down was not absorbing other people's negativity, not comparing yourself or your stuff to others. That's a big one for Linda Bruno because I have had some real stuff in my life the last 3 years that can easily turn my head to other people who have not suffered those losses. And I have to almost physically sometimes make that choice that I write in my gratitude journal how thankful I am for everything I do have. So that's intentional blindness. It works for me. So there are some times when it might work for you. Exactly, Dwayne. Negativity creates walls instead of bridges. And they're not just little thin, dry walls. They are bricks and rocks and heavy mortar, and they're hard to break through once we start down that path. So, when might intentional blindness result in something negative? You kind of mentioned a little bit of that. I put not being realistic was one of my first ones. What else did you come up with? When it might result, because you are intentionally blind, it might result in something negative. Tia said it could be a negative thing when we intentionally avoid dealing with our own shortcomings. Absolutely. Things that we could improve about our lifestyle or personality that would be beneficial, but we know will be difficult. Same way with today, right, Tia? The things that we're going to talk about, if they were all easy, pretty much anything that I present, if it was easy, everybody would already be doing it. And so we have to make that conscious effort, don't we? It can push people away. Absolutely. That intentional blindness can push people away when you're new to working together and you miss the blind or hidden areas, which could help everybody. Yeah, because you don't want to face them. And I'm going to be honest, years ago, before I knew about my own behavioral tendencies, my intentional blindness was, and my parents brought it to my attention when I was a child, and I chose to ignore it. They called it bullheadedness. I happen to call it strength now because I try to work in the positive aspect of that. But years ago, I could be very stubborn, very bullheaded. And now there's a fine line, isn't there, between working in our strengths and letting them be overwhelming to the point where they become weaknesses. So that's what we have to think about. Just like Albert said, we miss the blind or hidden areas that could help everyone. If I know I'm bulldozing over people and that I'm not allowing them to be creative and express their ideas, that's on me. That's my intentional blindness coming into effect. And it's not going to serve me well. So all of the above. I put avoiding confrontation, which you all mentioned, or issues that need to be dealt with, or being even overly critical or judgmental of people. We make a decision about the way things should be. Somebody mentioned politics earlier. You can talk about religion. You can talk about a lot of different things, whether schooling should be online, whether people should graduate this year. We can come up with thousands of things that we could be intentionally blind about. But being overly critical and overly judgmental of somebody else typically doesn't serve us well. If we find that their stance on something or the way they're reacting to something isn't good for us, then we don't have to criticize that. We just have to make sure we don't jump in. I get you, Cheryl. I hear you. It's very easy to do, isn't it? So thinking about this now, let's move forward and talk about some areas. And I've left space on your handouts. And if you're not using your handouts, I highly recommend you make yourself some notes today. Something popped up in my mind the other day and I thought, oh, I can remember that. And guess what? I didn't. I don't know what it was. It was really cool at the time. And I thought, oh, I need to use that. And then I forgot it because I didn't make a note. So I'm going to suggest you either use your handouts for this and make yourself some notes. That's why I've left space. or that you make notes yourself to determine what you want to do with this. So these are the first four we're going to look at. The first one is my weaknesses, my struggles, my temptations. And I want you to take a moment and write down any of your weaknesses, struggles, or temptations. Let's just do that one first so that you take time to do that. And I'll share with you mine, and then I'm going to be quiet. I need control. That's my behavioral tendency. I'm what's called a powerful choleric. And one of my quote fears in life is that I will lose control. And that can be a weakness and a struggle for me, which comes, I think, real close to that bullheadedness. The fact that I'm an introvert, which I love, but I can also let myself become isolated. So do you see what I'm talking about? I will tout to everybody how much I love being an introvert, but then realize I haven't talked to anybody in 3 days, and that's not healthy mentally. So I'm going to give you a minute to write some of those things down under just number one right now: weaknesses, struggles, and temptations. And feel free, if something pops up that you don't mind sharing, put it in the chat box. The more you share, the more people in the room go, "Whew, I wasn't the only one." Thank you, Steph, for doing that. Maria said, I can be self-critical while looking at the positive in other people. Yep, me too. My secondary behavioral tendency is a perfect melancholy, which means I want life, and my life in particular, to be perfect. And usually I'm harder on myself, as Maria is indicating, than I am on anybody else. So that can be a weakness and a struggle because we're not living in the positive when we're doing that, are we? And Albert says, yes, he understands that as well. So that awareness then helps us decide we're not going to beat ourselves up over things. So I see several of you are agreeing with that. Procrastinating, a weakness or a struggle or temptation. And Lorelai, I'm just going to add this comment because what I hear, I do training on procrastinating, and what I hear from people is, I work better under pressure. The studies I've seen, overwhelmingly, not all of them, I will use that little disclaimer here, but overwhelmingly, the studies I've seen say people don't work better under pressure, they work faster under pressure, which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because if you're under pressure, you may not have time to give it the depth of thought that it needs or the attention to detail that it needs. And so procrastination then becomes a weakness that we are intentionally blind about because I work better under pressure. And typically that's not true. There may be certain instances where it is, but overwhelmingly, experts in that area show that that's not the case. Catch myself being judgmental and make it stop. There you go. We can make it stop, can't we? Oh, Susan, I'm right there with you. Cynical. Don't believe others if it doesn't make sense. And sometimes even when it does make sense, I don't necessarily believe others. I'm a cynical person too, as is Brenda. I don't always plan. Oh, no, Brenda said, I don't always plan every detail out is a weakness, and being able to go with the flow is a strength or a talent. Yes, high expectations, don't understand why things can't work. And so many of these you're noticing already. Tia said, I'm phlegmatic and introverted, so it can be very hard for me to make decisions and take leadership roles. And you're noticing that some of these, if we're paying attention, then are also strengths, aren't they? Ian said, allowing my mouth to be faster than my brain. Yep, all of the above, right? On my end, Deb's webcam went out. I'm hoping you all can still hear me because we're having a thunderstorm here. So Cheryl said super judgmental. Deb came back. Hi, Deb. Super judgmental of others and also introverted. Yes, not handling conflict situations well. Susan, there aren't a lot of people that do. I just have to add this for Susan so she doesn't beat herself up. I was reading a book several years ago. It was called The Joy of Conflict Resolution, was the little word in there. And the first chapter talked about this fellow had interviewed his professors in his conflict class that he had taken when he was in graduate school. And as he was interviewing them, they were together in a setting, and the two professors started arguing over whose mentor was best. And they got into a pretty deep argument about it, which I thought, wow, that just shows that we all struggle with that, right? So we need to be kind to ourselves throughout this, but we also need to be realistic when we can make those changes. So the next one says, my strengths. And as we already mentioned, some of our weaknesses are just overdone strengths. So think about that. What's one of your strengths? Thanks, Cindy. I appreciate that. Not sure. Yeah, never sure what's happening. I'm sure every platform out there is experiencing extremely high value, so high volume. So yeah, that's part of it, isn't it? It's part of our, I'm so thankful for technology. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I couldn't live without it. And there are days I sure could live without it. Steph said organization and empathy. Terry said stamina. Yeah, strength. I put down control. Remember, I said that was one of my weaknesses, but it can also be a very good strength if I don't overdo it. Maria said getting things done quickly. I'm a lifelong learner, which means I can forget to have a life sometimes because I read just general articles and books and novels, and I keep notepads by everything I read because I'm always writing down a phrase or something that comes to mind that will help with my work. So I think that's a strength, but it can be overdone. Yeah, Riva, when I want to. There's a key for all of us, isn't it? When I want to is when I actually apply some of these things. I'm introverted, which I put down as a weakness, but my strength is that I'm okay being isolated during this time because it's my normal process for long periods of time. Advocating for others, getting to the bottom line, logistically working it out, meet the deadlines. I want you to know your strengths because sometimes those we use intentional blindness on as well. And we act as if we do nothing right. And I don't want any of you ever to do that. And some of you are perfect melancholies as your primary behavioral tendency. And whoever mentioned we can be hard on ourselves and critical about ourselves, that's what happens with a perfect melancholy. And being perfect, which is you're striving always for perfection, can be a very good quality. So don't beat yourself up even about that. Just know when you're being too hard on yourself. Patience in the face of ignorance. And I like the phrasing on that, which I'm not even going to go there. It does seem like that, but it's our perspective on what that ignorance is about, isn't it? So we have to be fair to the other person because, yeah, it can really get on our nerves. Mona said, stay away from negativity. Absolutely. Creative, empathetic, good listener. You can't fix stupid. Yeah, nurses say that a lot when somebody does something silly. Olga said, just like Mo positivity, viewing things at all angles. Yep, understanding others. All of the above. Let's move on to the next one, number 3, which is at the bottom of page 1 of your handouts. What are your gifts? Type one of your gifts. That's different than a weakness, isn't it? Or a strength. What's one of your gifts? There you go, Claudia. I've seen that one too. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. There's a t-shirt that says that. Humor, yes. Patience, deep empathy, although it can get me if I'm not careful. Absolutely, Rebecca, because you can take on all the troubles of the world, can't you? Pretty upbeat, that's great. Empathy, creativity, those are gifts because we can all find something in the list you all just put in there that we don't have as much of as we would like to have. So that becomes a gift, doesn't it? Not just a strength. It's a gift for you. I think, as Riva said, looking for the positive is a gift that I have. And even then, I have to protect that gift, don't I? If I expose myself to a lot of toxicity, a lot of negativity, all those kinds of things, I am human. And our old lizard brain, they call it, was very mired in the negativity. And so we need to be aware of that. My chat box is moving around in front of me. I'm guessing Cindy's doing that. So she's maybe making the chat bigger. That's good. I like that. So yeah, we need to recognize our gifts too. And during times like this, when it's easy for our, and I'll use that term lizard brain because I've heard that or read that being used in articles and things, when our brain tends to go back to where we started, if you will, as a species, then we need to pull out that positive part of our gifts and our talents. Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. And then your talents. Your talents might be something like you are artistic, you sing well, you're a great photographer, you're creative, all those kinds of things. And some of these overlap, but I didn't want to just put one option out there for your strengths and your positive pieces of you because I want you to look at it from different perspectives. That's when you do get intentional blindness, yes, the logical brain, yet also creative. That's good. Research and public speaking, Steph. I recognize your name. I know that. Curiosity, creative, all of the above. What are your talents? I think that I have a talent for good research and then culling and gleaning from that research to bring you things that actually work in the real world. Because I joke with people, especially when we're talking about conflict and things like that, and I will say, don't you get upset when you read the book on how to resolve every conflict in the world, and on page 67 it says, if you do this, the other person will say this, and poof, everything is fine. Because you can follow every step on page 67 through page 267, and the other person doesn't have to respond that way. So I want to be able to figure that out myself, and that can be sometimes a talent. I want to bring things to you that I think are real world and not complicated to apply. I was reading a book a couple weeks ago and I actually put it aside for right now because the first couple of chapters were very meaty and real world and not simplistic, but they made sense. I could do this. And then we got into some real theoretical stuff, and everything we were supposed to do to move through our day was going to take an extra 20 minutes. And he said that. And I thought, okay, if it's that complicated that I have to start the day by taking 20 minutes to figure out what my day is going to be like, I'm probably not going to do this. So I hope it's helping you to have some of these simpler things we can take a look at. Supervisory skills, if you're a supervisor. Do you have good supervisory skills, good leadership skills? Firm, when you're thinking about being firm as a supervisor, it could override into bossy and mean and rigid. But I'll caution you that sometimes people will call you bossy and mean and rigid, and really it's just discipline, isn't it? And sometimes that's necessary. There are some of you who have a behavioral tendency of peaceful, and I saw that mentioned earlier. If you're a supervisor, you struggle with disciplining somebody because in your mind, that's conflict, that's confrontation, that's being mean. In reality, it's just being a good supervisor, isn't it? Because people need boundaries. And what happens is if you have more than one person working for you and you don't take that discipline to heart to help them be better, other people are going to observe that and they're going to wonder why somebody is being treated better than they are. So we need to be aware of that as well. So supervisory skills, Cheryl said, end up doing things for them because I get too impatient explaining. Yeah. And you know what, Cheryl, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so when you do that for them, guess what? They'll kind of figure out a way they can't do it next time, right? It's just too hard. I just don't understand or whatever. Not everybody, but it is a human tendency for us to do that. So we need to be careful of it. Try to show my positivity. It's hard sometimes, absolutely, Mona. And sometimes we have to go back and fill our own tanks before we can do that, don't we? So be aware of that as well. I've got a basic foundation of positivity, but oh my goodness, the last few weeks have pushed me to the limit in some areas. And I actually have done things to limit my exposure. The power of your words. It's something we need to be aware of, isn't it? Intentional blindness, this is what comes from a person who is intentionally blind about their words. These are the kind of statements they make. This is just who I am. They know how I am. They know what I say. They know I like to be snarky. That's intentional blindness. I've worked with people like that, where they thought it was hysterically funny to be very biting and sarcastic and downright mean to the point where my feelings were hurt. And I've got a pretty thick skin these days. But that is no excuse that this is who you are. As somebody mentioned earlier, we need to try to improve in those areas if we know we're affecting other people, don't we? So be very mindful and have insight the power of your words. I read something this morning, and this lady, she wasn't even talking about the power of her words. I guess she was in a sense, but she said she took her son to the amusement park, and her stomach was getting upset because they were riding on all of this stuff that was tossing them around and so forth. And she said, in my mind popped this thought to smile at him and say, aren't you lucky to have a mom that would take you to the amusement park? And she said, I thought, oh my gosh, if I say that, I'm going to make him feel like he owes me something. I'm going to make him feel guilty that his mom took him to the amusement park. And she stopped herself in that moment before any words came out, and she hugged him and she said, I am so lucky to have a son that I can take to the amusement park. Wow, that's quite a lesson, isn't it? She also, like, when people use their zodiac sign as an excuse to be a terrible person, or just their personality, right, Cheryl? This is who I am. And that's, I can say I used to joke before I kind of paid attention to who I am, the bullheadedness. I said, I'm a redhead, I'm a Taurus, and I'm German. So there you go. But no, that's not a good enough reason. It isn't even a reason, because I don't know if any of that's really true, that it affects how I act. I need to be careful of that. Yeah, Dwayne, people react different ways to sarcasm. And truly, I believe the sarcasm is meant to be hurtful sometimes, and it's disguised under being cutesy. So that's what I talk about when I talk about the power of words. Are they negative? Are they positive? What are you doing to fill other people's tanks during this time to help them see the positive? Now, here's something I want you to hear very clearly. You are not responsible for their reactions to things. The only thing you're responsible for is what you say, how you act, how you interact with them. But on the other hand, if you're totally negative all the time, you're certainly spewing that all over them, aren't you? I don't want you to take on the burden of their reactions to things. I just want you to say, you know what? That person is still as negative as they ever were, but it makes me feel good to be positive. That's what I want you to see for yourself. So are you being negative or positive in this whole situation we're in right now? Am I intentionally blind about the effect of my words on people? Here's something else I want you to be aware of. It's tough right now. I'm just putting it out there. It is tough right now. But there are going to be other times during our lives for most of us that it will be tough again. Hopefully never, ever, ever anything like a COVID-19 virus floating around the world. But we will have things that happen in our lives that are very tough. Remember these things when you're going through something that is very tough, an illness, a financial crisis. Because something that I tell people, and I'm not being negative, I'm being realistic, is that when we are all back to work the way we're supposed to be, there are going to be tremendous financial effects of this, even with what they're calling helicopter money dropping out of the sky for people. At some point, we have to pay the piper. And so I'm not making a judgment about health and financial well-being. I'm just saying that this won't be over when we all are allowed to go back to work, will it? So be aware of these things as you're working through to get to totally the other side of this. And then also be aware that sometimes things happen within our own lives that we need to be aware of. Amy said it just kind of feels like trying to put out a kitchen fire during an earthquake. Yeah, kind of the same things. Absolutely. Lead by example. Absolutely. Saying just the way I am or I've always been this way doesn't mean you can't change for the better. You got it. Being insightful is a good sign of a positive, deep thinking. Hope it's the most important characteristic when choosing the correct words. We have to be prepared to reflect on our blind spots to help others more effectively. Yes, absolutely. And then not take responsibility for what they choose to do, right? So the other ones that are listed here under number 7, what's my attitude about my work? I'm not even going to ask you to put it in the chat box because I don't want you to feel vulnerable doing that, but I want you to make your own notes. This is where that intentional blindness comes in. What's my attitude about my work? What's my attitude about the changes in my workplace? Not just working remotely right now, but there'll be other changes. There were 2 months ago, 2 years ago, there'll be more. What's my attitude about my coworkers, my supervisor, our patrons? I walked into a workshop several years ago and we were talking about customer service. And one of the comments that I made right up front, I said, "So what do you think when your patrons come in the door?" And somebody sitting right up front, who happened to be a supervisor, crossed their arms, crossed their legs, leaned back, and said, "I think here comes another idiot." I was just startled. It took me a second to respond, and I smiled and I said, "You might be in the wrong job." And then I just went on with my workshop because I didn't even know how to address that. So we need to be aware of that, don't we? Thank you, Reva. I love that you love your job. I do too. I love what I do. I hope I'm doing it until they have to carry me out. Dwayne said, best job I ever have. I love that. I want to get back to my people. I feel the same way, Dwayne. Even though I get to do webinars, I told somebody, I said, I miss seeing people face to face too. Love my job. Change is always happening. Albert loves his job. Took a webinar with you a while back about attitude. Do you have to go to work or do you get to go to work? Exactly. Our phrasing makes so much difference, doesn't it? So, I've loved my two jobs. Yes. Amy said, I love my patrons and miss them, and I miss my students. Good, good, good. I love that. There might be some people in the room that don't feel that way today. You can change part of that, can't you? I don't want you to go find another job. This would not be a good time to try to do that. At some point, you might want to. I hope not. But certainly you can always change your attitude, can't you? Do you have to go to work? As Lorelei said, I use that phrase a lot. Or do you get to go to work? I say it to myself. I get up in the morning and I only have two cats and a dog here living with me. And I will say to one of them, I have to go exercise. And as soon as it comes out of my mouth, I will say, I get to go exercise. I say it out loud. I'm fortunate that I can exercise and that I have the flexibility in my schedule to do that, and I'm healthy enough to do that. And so my phrasing sets the tone for the day, doesn't it? So we all need to be aware of that. One of the things that I've read recently is that just start your day by saying it's going to be a great day. And if you do that, it switches a little bit in your mind and makes you think, you know what, I'm going to find ways to make it a great day because sometimes we have to put a little effort into it. Yes, exactly, Maria. I miss the patrons, but I'm also worried about the health of my coworkers. I think that's true for everybody. A neighbor said to me, sent me an email yesterday and said, if you're going back to Publix again, no hurry, but I'd like a couple more loaves of bread. Now, this is not somebody who's incapacitated or anything like that. She also said in the same email she had been to the Walmart neighborhood market yesterday. So it's not somebody that's not going out. And I thought, okay, I'm not planning on going out for other than to go get my mail, which is at a community mailbox area for at least another week or so because I figure the less I go out, the less I limit my exposure. Like Maria said, I'm not worried about my health per se, but I'm also not going to jeopardize it. And that's what I told her. I said, I may not go to Publix for another couple of weeks. I ordered some things online that will help me get through that time. So just being aware of that and knowing what's going on around you. Here's the thing. Even if you're not a powerful choleric like I am, the biggest issue we're dealing with right now is uncertainty. Most of us, as far as the emotional drain that we're going through, it's uncertainty, and uncertainty creates fear. And you'll hear me say this if you come to any other webinars with me in the next couple of months. I will use this phrase over and over again until you just think, I just can't take it anymore. But I say it to myself, control the controllables. You cannot control whether somebody down the street gets COVID-19. You can control whether you walk right next to them when you're out walking, like I saw somebody walking in my community earlier. Two sets of people, 1 foot apart. Now, unless they're living together in the same household, which it was, I don't think so. They didn't appear that way. They might be, but that's not maybe being as cautious as you could be. So control your controllables. Can you control what you're eating right now? I'm having trouble with that. I'm going to be honest. I'm having trouble controlling what I'm eating, which is another reason I don't want to go to the store because I had brownie mix on my grocery list. You all know I'm very willing to be very transparent with you. So I crossed that off of my grocery list because not only did I not need to eat the brownies, I would have had to buy eggs and vegetable oil to go with it, which then would have spoiled because I wouldn't have used them. And that's when I sat down and placed an order for some things that are healthier that I can eat. So can you control what you eat? Can you control what you're spending? You need to pay your bills, of course, but it's very easy for some of us to go on to any website and order some stuff right now. Reva has a bag of Cheetos, no fair. Girl Scout cookie season. Oh man, they're going to really suffer, aren't they? So just saying that control the controllables, whether it's financially, relationally. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, our whole family is locked up together at home. Wow, what an opportunity. An opportunity to play games, an opportunity to talk about life, an opportunity to do a lot of different things, and then find ways to get by yourself so that you can have some peace of mind and get yourself refreshed. So control the controllables. Number 8 says, am I controlling my emotions? Am I easily offended? This one comes first. Reva said, how lucky my kids 1,300 miles away. And some people would disagree with that being lucky, right? You can order Girl Scout cookies. Stop it, Maria. That is not helpful. Just kidding. Steph said she just ordered sandals. I get, I kind of go back and forth. I haven't bought anything that I didn't need to eat or my animals didn't need in the last month or so. And I'm really trying to control that. Um, just because I think it's healthier for me to do that. So then think about controlling your emotions, because that does come into play when we eat too much, when we spend too much, when we snap at people. Obviously, our emotions are involved in all of that. Am I easily offended? I put that one first because this used to be really bad for me. And I worked on that over the years. And when my husband was still alive, I would tell him that my recovery time is much better now. I would get offended still occasionally, very rarely, before he died, and then I would recover from it in a matter of minutes instead of a matter of days like it used to be, because I couldn't control my emotions. Am I easily hurt? That was another piece of that. I was offended or hurt. Am I moody? I know I could be. I can work on that. Do I withdraw? Do I pout? Am I the person with my arms crossed when somebody says there's something wrong? I say nothing or whatever. That's on me. Do I lash out or snap at people? I'm going to tell you right now, if we could take a survey, that last one has escalated over the last month. For even people that aren't working at home, because of everybody just kind of walking on eggshells right now, again, the unknown, the uncertainty, the fear of that, all of that, our emotions come to the surface. Take a step back. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why am I angry at that person? They live here too. Or why am I angry at this coworker? I'm not surprised she's upset or he's upset because of look at what we're going through. But take a step back. Good, Steph. I'm fine, really, right? In all caps, bold, 86-point font, right? That's the way we react right now. We need to just admit, you know what? I do pretty well, but there are times when it overcomes me. I'm overcome by what's going on. If we're just honest with ourselves and take off those blinders, then we can deal with it. If we pretend, we can't ever deal with it. So we need to be careful about whether or not we're dealing with it. Other things we can look at. What are my thoughts? My late husband, bless him, dealt with negativity when he was growing up. Kind of took that as the normal for everybody. We worked on that over many, 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 many years. And he was doing so much better when he got sick. And he would say to me, how do I stop those thoughts from coming? And I said, you cannot stop the thoughts. From everything I've read, the thought comes. But here's what you have control over. How long are you going to wallow in it? Or let it linger if you want to be gentler about that. But I say wallow in it. How are you going to react to it? How are you going to express the emotions that it brings on? So the thought brings emotions, the emotions create behaviors. In between, we have some control, don't we? The thought comes, it's going to come. The negativity is going to come. You see the new statistic, you see whatever. Oh my gosh, the house is on fire. I saw something the other day, and this person was saying, I wish when I started to feel anxious, my shoe would catch on fire. And that just made me laugh out loud, and I will never forget that now. If you have an emotion that creates issues for you, use a phrase like that so that when the emotion pops in, it's so ridiculous, it almost makes you laugh. the thought that comes to mind. Because now when I feel anxious, I'm always going to think, I wish my shoe would catch on fire, because that would draw my attention to it. Listening to my conscience. I need to know what's good for me, what serves me well, not to the point of being selfish, not to the point of excluding other people, but I need to listen to my conscience, don't I? And make sure that I'm doing what I value. Steph said just learning to say no. We need to learn that in regular times, don't we, Steph? Many of us. Claudia said one of my favorite things to say these days, I hit delete far more often than I hit send. There you go. Jack said, you can't stop a bird. I love these sayings, folks. You can't stop a bird from landing on your head, but you can stop it from building a nest. Absolutely. Riva said, I go on occasional crying, Jags, but get it under control. That's perfectly okay. I still cry about my husband, and he's been gone for over 3 years now. About a month ago, maybe when this whole thing was starting to ramp up and things were happening outside of that issue, and something triggered a memory in my mind, and I just sat down on the chair and cried for about 5 minutes. And after I cried for about 5 minutes, I smiled because of the happy memories. It's okay to recognize that, isn't it? Cheryl said, chew your words 7 times before you spit them out. Oh my goodness. I wish we had a stenographer here that could keep track of all of your wonderful sayings. I had not heard that one, Cheryl. And to add to Steph, say no and not feel guilty. Yeah, because it's not going to serve you well if you feel guilty, is it? No is part of setting boundaries with people. And if we do that, we will be more emotionally healthy. I want to go back to one here and just where it says, do I lash out or snap at people? I wrote down HALT. If you've ever heard that acronym, it means be careful of interacting with other people when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I think right now all of us are all of that. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I think that's what's going on right now. And experts tell us not to just to be very careful of our words when we experience one of those things. Think about how bad and how hard it is to be careful of our words when we're experiencing all of those: hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And you can add a whole bunch more. Tia, thank you. Would you drop me an email? If you have your handouts, I would really appreciate that. Not that I want you to do my work for me, but I just can't write them down at the same time I'm presenting. My first page of my handouts always has my email address on it. If you need me after this webinar, drop me an email. I'm happy to help you flesh some of these things out. Thanks, Tia. I appreciate that. So lashing out and snapping at people, be careful about being hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Your behaviors. Yes, the thought comes. Yes, it creates an emotion. Do you put up the stop sign that says, I am not going to react to that emotion in a negative way? That's your behavior. You have control over that. Be very careful about it. The top one says, my thoughts. I've got to ask you, what are you ingesting right now? News 24/7. Talked to a lady, this has been probably 2 weeks ago, and she was across the street and she was upset. And, why do I have to stay in? Other people are riding their bikes, blah, blah, blah. And she's in her 80s. And I think her son is the one that told her to stay in. And she said, everybody else is allowed to go out. And she was outside, so obviously she could walk her dog. And I said, well, they're just trying to protect you. They're not trying to punish you. Well, I know, but, and I said, so what are you doing all day? I knew the answer. And she said, I watch TV. I said, do you watch comedies? And again, I knew the answer. And she said, nope, got the news on. And I said, maybe you want to consider watching something else. She didn't get it. I'm pretty sure I could go over there right now and the news would be on. But that's up to us, isn't it? What are we ingesting? Hallmark Channel, love that. I only have basic channel, basic cable, Riva. But I did see where some streaming device, and I don't have any of those, is doing a 14-day free trial that I might have to try. Steph said, hanging out with my dogs, running on the treadmill, walking with my husband, cooking meals for us, the positive things. What are your behaviors to deal with this? Steph said, read the news once a day. Yeah, that's all we need. And you know what? It'll change the next time we read it anyway right now, because the experts don't exist in this situation. And that's why I quit even being as close to it as I was, because I figured out that everybody's expert opinion is different than somebody else's expert opinion. Faulty Towers is good medicine. I have Friends on DVD. I have As Time Goes By, an old British show on DVD. John Krasinski, some good news. Oh, I like that. I'm going to have to look that up too. Family meals together. Absolutely. Start a new hobby, rediscover an old one. Yep, walking with your dog, working online with students and faculty, PBS British comedies. That's as time goes by. That's a romantic comedy, by the way, just being honest with you. Yep, love that good news. All of the above. So the last segment here, the bottom of page 2 and on to page 3, what are you doing to control your health? Some of you are walking on the treadmill, walking your dog, doing all those kinds of things. I already told you my weakness right now is grabbing anything that's edible. Yep, I had carrots in the refrigerator, so guess what I did? I made ranch dressing to dip them in. So now I've got all this salt floating around in my system, and of course the fat with that and all of that. And so I backed off of that. My finances, I'm working real hard on that, not to let that get carried away. It's hard. I did pay a $7.95 shipping fee earlier today on something because I thought I'd rather spend $8 than risk my health going out. Relationships. Yep, I just ate a cookie. Okay, Steph, send me one. A goal. Yep, absolutely. Eating junk food. Yep. Exercising. Yeah, I exercise every day, Cheryl, which I justify in my mind that I can eat junk food then. We can't, can we? Meditating, listening to music, set a bedtime, stick to it, find ways that will help you sleep, portion control, same schedule. Scheduling is very important. Structure is very important during this time. Dust it off your bike, wonderful new recipes, riding your bike outdoors, more fruits and vegetables. I love that. That's what I'm missing right now is the fruits and vegetables, Terry, because I haven't gone to the grocery store. I'm trying to figure out if I should try delivery service now. So you see how much control you have? Look at that list, folks. You have a lot of control. Don't have any control over COVID-19 being out in our world. None. Zero. But you have control over dozens, if not hundreds of things. Thank you, Steph. I appreciate that. I probably am going to do that. So you also can look at your habits, as we talked about, your personal responsibility for the choices you make after today's webinar. Oh, I love that. Corner stands, wonderful. We have a farmer's market in our community, but they've disbanded that for the time being. Yeah, super rural area might not work, but no, I'm in a community. We could do that. FaceTime, Zoom with family members. I've been emailing a lot, touching base with people, texted a few people yesterday. Be careful about your politics. Don't get sucked into the negativity of whatever side or in between or all around that you are. Be very careful of that. Same way with religion, spiritual mindset. If you've got something in your life, maybe now's a good time to focus on that a little bit more. Mona said try to focus on positivity. Awesome. Traffic, or maybe no traffic. Eat together. Time to learn more things. Yep. This Tiger King count. I've heard about it, but I've never watched it because I'm a big animal lover and I'm always afraid something bad is happening. So I don't watch those things. So be very careful about your choices during this time, including the choice you make about your own intentional blindness. At the bottom of page 3, it says we've discussed a lot of areas. You have a choice today, don't you? You have a choice to leave here today and be more focused on something that's going to serve you well. Take off the blinders. Don't use anything as an excuse. You know, I heard somebody say a few years ago, the word rationalize just means we're telling ourselves rational lies. So be careful about what you're rationalizing with your blindness right now. It's up to you which direction you're going to go in. And you have lots of things we've talked about today under the things that are in your life. Which areas do you need to take a look at? Where do you need to be attentive so that you continue to grow as a person? If you're going to set goals about this, try to make them specific and measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely so that you know 3 months from now, wow, look at that. In mid-April, I decided to do this, and this is what I did to make sure it would happen. Excuse measurable being spelled, kind of like it spelled that way. Maybe from that graphic, maybe from a different non-English speaking graphic. So I apologize for that, but I think I'm going to leave it that way. I kind of like that. Cindy likes it too, because sometimes that's what it feels like. Here's the thing with that. This just popped into my head. I told myself I was going to lose 3 pounds. That became a mess. So it was measurable, all right. but I've gained 2. So that didn't work. So yeah, measuring a mess. Exactly, Steph. That's exactly right. I love that. I want positive results for you. Think about what positive results you can see when you make some of the changes we've talked about today, or just be more intentional about what you're focusing on rather than intentional about what you're ignoring. That's what I want for you today. You may need to ask somebody to hold you accountable. How would they do that? We're not face to face right now. Email, texting, FaceTiming, whatever. If somebody needs to hold you accountable, and only you know if you need that, figure out a way to do that. I want to thank you for being here today. I want you to go forth, heal your intentional blindness. If you need me for anything, drop me an email. I'm here. I'm
Thank you,
not
Linda,
going
for that
anywhere. And I love to
fantastic
respond to
webinar.
those.
And
Thanks
thank you to
everybody
our
for being
folks in
here.
chat who provided some really great sayings. Thank you to Deb, our American Sign Language interpreter. And I hope whatever you do for the rest of your day is just fantastic. I'm going to turn off the recording right now, but if you need to type something in chat, please feel free to do so. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.